title of this study is The Harvest is Ripe. We're going to start with Revelation 14, verses 14 to 16. Revelation 14, verse 14 to 16. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud. Upon the cloud sat one like the Son of Man. In other words, Jesus was sitting on the cloud. John sees him in vision, having on his head a golden crown, and has in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, and cried with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud. So the angel came out of the temple of God in heaven, and cried to Jesus, and said, Thrust in the sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap. For the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud, Jesus, thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. What's interesting is these verses are immediately following the three angels' messages. So we can conclude that the final verses of Revelation 14 describe metaphorically the final reaping of the harvest of the saved and the lost. You see, Revelation 14 to 16 is talking about reaping the saved, and verses 17 to 20 is talking about reaping the lost, who will then suffer the wrath of God. So let's first take a look at the saved. Reaping the saved. The metaphoric symbolism here is Jesus, the one on the cloud, has the sharp sickle in his hand, and he is harvesting the wheat. Now, this beautiful picture by Nathan Green shows Jesus with that sickle in his hand, and affectionately taking a look at this harvest of this wheat. Now keep in mind, back in the day of the writing of the Bible, they didn't have combines and all that. This is how they did it. So if there was a wheat field that needed harvest, they used a sharp sickle, and they would harvest the wheat. And then they would, throw it up in the air and let the chaff blow away, and all that symbolism you see in the Bible. Well, notice that this symbolism of harvesting the saved is gathering grain. It's gathering wheat. It's gathering valuable crop. It's sifting out the chaff and saving the good stuff. So let's look at this verse again. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud sat one like the Son of Man. So the first thing we learn from this, taking a close look at this verse, is Jesus is symbolically sitting on a white cloud. Is it possible that this is symbolic of the starting of the final sequence of events leading to the second coming? I think it might. So this sitting on a white cloud and the angel coming out and saying, the harvest is ripe, let's do this, is, I believe, symbolic of the final harvest of the saved just before Jesus comes. And now in the same verse, notice, let's take a look at the sharp sickle. He that sat on the cloud thrust his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. So Jesus he's doing reaping by using this sharp sickle. The world is ripe for harvest. The great harvest is the end of all things. And the sharp sickle was used in harvesting grain. The harvested grain here is the gathering of the saints. So again, notice Jesus is using this tool to harvest the grain, and the grain is the crop they've been trying to grow. It is the payload of the season of the harvest. He's not harvesting straw. He's not harvesting the weeds. He doesn't even want to keep the chaff. He's harvesting to get the wheat, the valuable crop. Being as the sequence of Revelation 14 places this harvest right after the three angels' message, it appears that these messages, the three angels' messages, are the last warnings to a lost world. So the three angels' message that we've been studying about in past sessions, which started in the 1800s, mid-1800s after the Great Awakening, this three angels' message is God's push to warn a lost world that he's coming back, and they need to know the issues and not be on the wrong side. That as things progress worse and worse, this whole issue of worship and of the Sabbath is going to be culminated in a final life and death choice of, am I going to take the mark of the beast, or am I going to accept God's seal? You know, during this pandemic, it has made many of us reevaluate our preparedness for not being able to get materials. When Costco didn't have any toilet paper, and even when they were only allowing people to have one bundle of toilet paper at a time, you know, look how much of a frenzy and panic buying that resulted in just toilet paper. We've been analyzing our lives and saying, you know, if you couldn't buy or sell, how could you live? How could you function? And we've been working to enhance our gardening and fruit trees, and we have a greenhouse, and we shake our heads and we go, we can't make enough food, even just for the two of us, to live on for a whole year. And we don't have enough materials to be able to preserve it through the winter. So my point is, number one, we should be working on being better prepared. But my point for this is that this temptation to accept the mark of the beast is not going to be as cut and dry and simple as we might have thought. When you're starving, and the only way you can get food is to go along with the establishment, with the one world government, and accept their policies, it's going to be a very harsh temptation to be able to not take the mark of the beast. Anyway, some sobering things to think about. Now the second half. So we've now looked at the harvesting of God's people. Now it says in verses 17 to 20, and another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. I didn't notice until right now, Jesus isn't harvesting the wicked. The angel is. I saw another angel come out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the altar which had the power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him who had the sickle. Him is not Jesus in this case, it's that other angel. Thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. That's interesting. I've been studying this all week, and I never noticed that Jesus isn't the one harvesting the wicked. Now let's take a look. Another angel came out of the altar which had power over fire. So what do you think that means? Power over fire. It seems to me that means power over fire is the symbol of vengeance, God's vengeance on the wicked who have been persecuting and killing and depriving his saints. They have gone through a great deal of difficulty during the Jacob's time, or little time of trouble, and now it's time to bring in the sickle. So my thinking is that this statement right here is talking about the close of probation, because when the sickle cuts down the wheat and gathers the wheat is forever harvested. Now when this angel takes takes a sickle. And notice it's not taking wheat. It's taking grapes. Okay, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this angel had power over fire. So this is going to be, I believe, the vengeance on the wicked. This will be the 7 last plagues right after the close of probation. This will be the final burning up of sin and sinners after the 1,000 years. So I think power over fire is symbolic of the vengeance of God. We also see the phrase, "Thus thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine." So again, this sickle is not taking down the wheat. This is taking down grapes. Now what's the significance of that? Well, the wicked world is ripe for harvest. Why is the sickle used to cut down ripe grapes? Well, this ripe term in the Greek means dry and withered. This picture is a grape plant that is not productive. So when you cut down a withered grape tree, you're getting rid of the tree and the leaves and the grapes because it's not productive. So again, this is the angel harvesting the wicked, and it's not the wheat. It's not the crop that was tried to be grown. It is unproductive, dry, and useless vegetation. Continuing, the angel thrust the sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. I believe this is the 7 last plagues. And the winepress was trodden without the city being Babylon. And the blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. I did some research on this because anytime I see something like this, a specific number, 1,600 furlongs, I wonder what's the significance. I could not find any commentary or concordance cross-referencing or Ellen White to give any good solid explanation about this, but notice that the blood came out of the winepress. So if you're harvesting grapes and you're going to make wine, you take the grapes, you put them in a wine press, and it squeezes the juice out of it. Now in this case, juice didn't come out, blood came out. And I believe that's symbolic of the murderous activities that had happened to the righteous at the hands of the wicked, and God is showing his vengeance. So, harvesting the lost, power over fire, I think is symbolic of vengeance. And the winepress producing blood, Isaiah 63 kind of gives a hint. For I will tread them in mine anger, God says, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. For the day of vengeance is in mine heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. We like to think of God as a loving, passionate, patient God, and he is, but he's also a just God, and this experiment of sin on earth is the only place in the universe that this is going on. And remember that Satan convinced a third of the angels, actually originally half the angels, to side with him and question God. And then as things became more clear, some of them returned, but we know that a third of the angels fell from heaven. So that's a really big deception, and the whole universe is watching, and we are the actors on the stage. And this isn't about us. This is about God. God is trying to settle the score that he's a loving, caring God, even though he's fair and just. So the only way to clear his name and to clean up the universe is to get rid of sin and sinners. He doesn't want anyone to perish. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him won't perish. But if people choose to not believe in him and not transform their lives, then they're choosing to die. And God doesn't have a choice, because heaven will never be safe and secure as long as sin and sinners exist. So eventually, the end game is this has to end. So, what's the significance of 1,600 furlongs? Well, the only thing I could find is 1,600 furlongs is about 184 miles. Jerome believed that 1,600 miles, or 184 miles, 1,600 furlongs was the length of Palestine, which of course was the center of the world, and those people were living in. So that was their point of reference. The main idea, I believe, is that the enemies of the Church of God are to be completely and finally overthrown. Therefore, the church can look forward to full and complete deliverance by God. Praise God for that. Now we read further and pull out some more pieces. An angel thrust the sickle in the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it in great winepress of the wrath of God. The winepress was trodden without the city, and the blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' hurdles, the space of 1,600 furlongs, which we believe is the enemies of God's people are completely overthrown. Now here's some insights from the Spirit of Prophecy. Ellen White, Letters and Manuscripts, Volume 1, page 194. She quotes this scripture of Revelation 14:12-20, and then states, I saw that we must be willing to go alone, that we must cut loose from everyone that will not walk godly in Christ Jesus. I saw that the unbelief of brother or sister, father or mother, husband, wife, or children was no excuse for any to hinder them from doing their duty. So Revelation 14:12-20 is talking about the harvest of the saved and the lost. And it boils down to, which side are you going to be on? And the issue is, are you going to allow an unbelieving loved one to influence you and drag you down? So, are you willing to go it alone? The way she says it, she says we must be willing to go it alone. Jesus said, if you love, your family more than me, then you're not worthy of me. So, we love our families. I love my wife. I love my children. I would do anything for them. I would die for them. But when it gets right down to, am I going to take the mark of the beast or not? If all of my family goes the other way, am I willing to leave them behind and make the right choice? You'll recall Adam and Eve, that was the issue. Eve was deceived, but Adam made a choice. He chose to not lose his spouse, and look what the mess we're in. We need to be willing to go it alone, ultimately. And that those will lose their souls if they seek to please their unbelieving friends more than God. Notice it doesn't say you can't please your friends, but if it's more important to please your unbelieving friends and sacrifice your relationship with God, then they'll be counted unworthy to be partakers of Christ's glory. I saw that Jesus was rejected by his own nation, and if Jesus suffered, we must be partakers of his sufferings. So if push comes to shove, and our unbelieving friends are pulling us down, we need to make sure that our eyes are wide open and we are willing to stand alone. And the risks of trying to please unbelieving friends can be an eternal risk. We need to be careful about that. She continues, said the angel, cut clear from everything or anyone that hinders my progress. I saw that the ties of nature between man and wife, parent and children need not be severed. So we don't, Jesus said, if you love them more than me, you're not worthy of me. This is not a mandate to get divorced. This isn't a mandate to kick your kids out of the house. I saw that the ties of nature between man and wife, parents and children need not be severed. Still, those who believe God and His truth must obey God, even if it displeased their nearest and dearest friends. That's the issue. The issue is not to have friends. The issue is not to divorce your spouse and kick your kids out of the house. The issue is we need to obey God first and not at the sacrifice of Him in order to not displease our loved ones. Family ties. Very serious. Think about that. And then, after quoting, this is another reference, Testimonies to the Church, Volume 6, page 16, she quotes again Revelation 14:12-19, and then she says, when the storm of God's wrath breaks upon the world, the 7 last plagues, it'll be a terrible revelation for souls to find that their house is being swept away because it is built upon the sand. Let the warning be given them before it's too late. We should now feel the responsibility of laboring with intense earnestness to impart to others the truth that God has given for this time. We cannot be too much in earnest. So, we need to warn others before it's too late. She continues, the heart of God is moved. Souls are very precious in His sight. It was for this world that God wept in agony. For this world, He was crucified. God gave His only begotten Son to save sinners, and He desires us to love others as He loved us. He desires to see those who have a knowledge of the truth, imparting that knowledge to their fellow men. So we have an urgent job to do. We are supposed to be reaching a lost world. Am I doing enough as a 3 angels message believing Christian to tell people about God's love? Or is this chaotic world we're in an opportunity for us to start a dialogue with someone about these things by saying, what do you think about what's been going on in the world? And then when they respond, you could say, and they'd say, well, what do you think? Instead of saying, yeah, it's crazy, you could give them a little bit of an insight of spiritual things. Because I believe, that this is the beginning of the end. God is letting the 4 angels letting go the control of the winds of strife, and Satan is having a heyday at many levels. And it's a window of opportunity for us to pray about that God will lead us to someone to be able to reach with the gospel. Now is the time of the last warning to be given. There is a special power in the presentation of the truth at the present time. But how long will it continue? Only a little while. If there was ever a crisis, it is now. Testimonies to the Church, Volume 6, page 16. I'll tell you what, we have more crisis now than we had when she said that. So it's getting worse. If there ever was a crisis, it is now. The crisis is now. So what do we now know that we're wrapping up Revelation 14? What is the message of Revelation 14? The 3 angels' messages are the last warning to a lost world. When Jesus does the final harvesting, there will only be 2 groups of people. The saved are the grain. The lost are the rotten grapes being to be burned. We must not allow unconverted friends and family members to drag us down. Now is the crisis and the time to try to reach others for the kingdom. Jesus is coming sooner than ever. We need to make our connection with Jesus more serious than it's ever been before. We need to pray for God to lead us to someone He wants us to reach for Him. The final moments will be rapid ones.